What's up, hockey fans? Welcome back to Sharks Territory and another edition of Frostbitten presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. In this episode, we are joined by Curtis Pashelka to discuss the latest in San Jose Sharks hockey, including the upcoming 2025 NHL Draft, free agency, Sharks training camp, and much more.
Dominate, 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 dominate. I did not come to play, I came to dominate, 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 dominate.
Hello, Sharks fans and all of you Sharks Territory. Welcome back to Frostbitten, and today we are joined by a very special guest from Bay Area News Group and the beat reporter for the San Jose Sharks of the San Jose Mercury News, none other than Curtis Pashelka. Curtis, welcome back to the show.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start off with some of the most recent news. What are your thoughts on Macklin Celebrini not winning the Calder Trophy this season?
Well, I think if you look at the course of the season, I think a lot of people, I think myself included, had him as sort of as the favorite. You know, maybe midway point of the season, by the time the Four Nations break came along, I had him kind of right there. But you know, the more the season went on towards the end of March and April, it was pretty clear that Lane Hudson was having a really special season. Record-breaking type of season in a lot of respects. Matching a lot of, or bettering a lot of marks that have stood around for a long time in the NHL. So it was just tough to ignore. I mean, I think we put a lot of, sometimes this, with the Calder Trophy, we want to put context to it. Like, you look at what Macklin Celebrini accomplished this season in terms of an 18-year-old in the NHL playing top-line center. That's not easy. That's exceptionally difficult to do. But when you look at the terminology of the Calder Trophy, you can't really take age into account. It's really just about who had the best year in their first full season in the NHL, and you weigh everything. And from my perspective, it was just Lane Hudson. What he did this year was just too tough to ignore. Certainly I went back and forth on it, but ultimately I think Lane Hudson was deserving of the Calder this year for sure.
Absolutely. A good runner-up was Dustin Wolf. And just to bring up some of the attitudes that Macklin Celebrini had about the Calder Trophy this season, when asked earlier about the race for the Calder, I believe his reply was, "I just want to stop losing." So obviously very competitive individual. A great first overall selection for San Jose Sharks. It's unfortunate he didn't get to join the beginning of Backoff as the second player in franchise history to get a Rookie of the Year award. But nonetheless, I believe Macklin Celebrini and the rest of the gang are not going to be discouraged. And if anything, this will probably light a little bit more motivation and fire underneath the competitive edge that Celebrini does possess. Next question from Mike or Tyler.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us, Curtis. We're pretty fresh off of the NHL scouting combine. A lot of chatter developing there. From the information you've gathered, obviously most fans and people around the league assume that the Sharks will take either Michael Misa or Matthew Schaefer at the number 2 spot, depending on who's available. But have you heard anything different that might surprise fans? Any other players that are jumping out and maybe circulating that the Sharks could be interested in them?
I have, actually. I don't think I do fully accept Schaefer to go number 1 to the Islanders. That'd be a shock if it wasn't, unless the Sharks could pull off a trade and maybe move up to number 1. But from people I've been talking to, yes, Misa is probably the favorite to be chosen by the Sharks at number 2. But I've also heard a lot of good things about Caleb Desnoyers, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but a guy whose game is very mature, and he's has a lot of the same characteristics as a Macklin Celebrini in terms of his maturity in his game. And, he played through some injuries this year, which I'm sure affected his production a little bit, and obviously not quite as eye-opening as Michael Misa's was in the Ontario League. But still, Caleb had a very impressive year in the Quebec League. And when you're trying to project what these players are going to look like 2 or 3 years from now, I've heard a lot of good things about Caleb and what he's going to turn into. So I fully expect the Sharks to still take Misa, but I've heard some things that, the door's not necessarily closed to another player. And I think Caleb would be a guy that the Sharks might seriously consider there.
Sure. And, if the Sharks were to select Michael Misa, have you heard whether or not it seems that Misa is NHL ready, or is there an expectation that he might go back to junior or the NCAA route?
From what I've heard, he's not quite there. He's not. It's a player like Celebrini last year, very rare to come into the league as an 18-year-old and do what he does. From what I understand, he's close, but he's not quite there. Maybe another year at junior or going to the college route. Could do Michael Misa a lot of good here. And there's certainly no rush if you're the Sharks. You don't need to get this guy into your lineup at 18 years old. Going back to junior, or going to the college route, could do a lot for his developments. And again, you're looking at what this player is going to be like in 2 or 3 years, and you want to have sort of a player that's sort of ready to take on the responsibility and all that comes with being an NHL player. And I think, a year or two from now, you're going to see a much more well-rounded player if that's going to happen. So, I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if the Sharks do draft Misa to come in and, maybe start the season with the team and get that 8 or 9 game audition, just to show if he's ready or not. Because, it's one thing to do it in the exhibition season and during camp, but it's another thing during the regular season. I think we saw that a few years ago with a guy like William Eklund. We started the season with the Sharks, and by the more as time went on, of those 7, 8, 9 games that he played, it was kind of clear to the team at that point that he wasn't quite ready for the NHL and wasn't quite ready for North American hockey. So they've been back to Sweden for another year, and they sort of took their time with his development. And I think the same thing could probably be had with whoever the Sharks take at number 2.
Yeah, I think all of us Sharks faithful are, hoping that we see another Celebrini, but obviously that's a generational kind of talent. Tyler?
Yeah, I was just wondering, we talked about the second pick. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the 30th pick, whether you heard anything about trading up or moving it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that when you look at the Sharks, they're picking at 30 and number 33 too. So can you package those picks together and move up to the early 20s and maybe get the player that you really covet there? Is that something that maybe another team in that range would be open to, or maybe including a prospect and moving even a little bit further up in the draft? I mean, when you look at Mike Greer and his tenure here with the Sharks, he's been open to that kind of thing. You remember his first year, even though it wasn't necessarily his draft. Doug Wilson Jr. more or less ran the first draft there in 2022. They dropped down from 11 and they got 2-3 picks out of that deal, moved back a little bit. Last year obviously they moved up to they traded up to get to number 11. So, and you look even back to last summer, and they moved a pick and a prospect to get Yaroslav Askarov. So I think generally speaking, Mike Greer has shown that he's open to those type of things. He's not so rigid in just keeping the picks. He's open to trying to improve his team as quick, sooner rather than later. And he feels those moves can do that. He'll be open to it. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see some movement on draft day, either first or second day, to if the Sharks do move up to get the player they want. I think they've done that quite a bit here these last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the acquisition of Yaroslav Askarov. We discussed before in the past few episodes about potentially drafting a goaltender. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see that. I don't quite know how deep this prospect pool in terms of goalies are. I don't think it's certainly not out of the question. I mean, you use a mid-round pick or a late-round pick on a goalie and let him develop at his own pace, whether that's overseas or here in North America. It's never a bad idea, I don't think, to go that route if you feel strongly about the player. And I think, The Sharks have done that in the past, and I would not be surprised if they go do that again. I think they picked the player in the 7th round last year, if I'm not mistaken, and just kind of see how it goes with him. And so again, if it happens, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean, either drafting a goalie or getting a veteran goalie to help pair with Askarov, I think that's big for the Sharks in the upcoming years. Aaron, Mike, any?
Yeah. So, last question about the draft. Let's just say the New York Islanders take the radical route, if you will, and decide to go with like Martone or Higgins, and the Sharks have the choice of Misa or Schaefer. In your opinion, which player are they leaning toward?
Oh, if that were to happen, I don't think there's much question that they would take Schaefer, even though they're very high on Sam Dick. And that's just my opinion, but even though they're very high on Sam Dickinson, they see him as having a bright future. A guy like Schaefer, who would fit right into that prospect pool pretty easily. He's a little bit different type of defenseman than Sam Dickinson is, and his personality, I think, would fit right in with the Sharks too, and just his style of play. I don't know if Matthew Schaefer's totally ready for the NHL right now. You look at, he's only really hasn't played that many games over these last couple of years, so I wonder about his readiness to step right in. But nevertheless, I think the Sharks would be very excited if that were to be the case. And if the Islanders do decide they want to choose the hometown kid and get Higgins in there. Wouldn't surprise me maybe if they try to just orchestrate a little bit of a deal, whether that's with the Sharks or Chicago, to try to get an asset out of it and not just necessarily just take the player, but work out an arrangement with one of those two teams where, the Sharks would, or the Blackhawks would move up to number 1, and in exchange the Islanders would get another asset plus get the player they want in Higgins or Martone. So that would be interesting if that were to happen. Be a lot of fireworks on draft night. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what happens there.
Absolutely. Any other follow-up questions from you, gentlemen, before I transition to the next topic here?
No, please transition.
All right, outstanding. All right, so one of the storylines going into the season will be William Eklund's contract extension. So, what do you think that contract looks like, and when do you anticipate it will be finalized?
Well, I wouldn't expect this thing, if it does get done during the course of the summer, maybe to have this try to get done by camp at the start of next season. I was thinking about this quite a bit. I think that I don't think the Sharks necessarily just want to give him it's either going to be a 2 or 3 year deal, or they're going to really want to go long term with him, 7 or 8 years, and make that type of commitment. I think the last thing they want to do is a 3 or 4 or 5 year deal and either walk him right to unrestricted free agency or put him at a spot like a Timo Meier was not too long ago, where he goes into his contract year owed a massive qualifying offer and putting the team maybe in a tough spot. So, from talking to William, and maybe talking to his agent a little bit, it doesn't seem like to me they're necessarily a huge rush to get this done. But I think, as we've seen in the past, if you wait until maybe next offseason to try to get this done, maybe it could be more expensive than it is right now. And so instead of maybe a deal that has maybe a $7 million AAV, maybe you're looking at more of an 8 or 9 type situation. I think the Sharks, want to try to keep this as economical as they possibly can, because knowing that next summer, obviously, Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini are both going to be eligible too for contract extensions. And I don't know if Mike Greer necessarily wants to have all 3 of those on his plate all at the same time. So I think it would behoove the Sharks to get something done this summer and work out a good number that works for both sides. And I think that would be somewhere in the $7 million AAV range for, that signal a commitment to William, that they like him and they want to be a part of this thing long term. But if they can't work out something long term, then I think something along the, a 2 or 3 year bridge deal would probably make sense for both sides as well.
The fastest game on ice, just another level. Welcome to the Stanley Cup playoffs, where legends are made and every shift can turn the tide. And now, with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you can take every slap shot, breakaway, and overtime thriller to the next level. New to betting on the Stanley Cup playoffs? You're in for an exciting time. Getting started is a breeze. Fire up the DraftKings Sportsbook app, pick your team to win, lock in your wager, and you're off to the races. It's fast, simple, and puts you right in the middle of the action. Now, I know what you're thinking, San Jose Sharks fans. My team's not in it, but there's still plenty to watch and cheer for, especially your former San Jose Sharks. So, some of the money lines that I am interested in, 60-minute line, goal in first 10, first to 5 shots on goal are my personal favorite, as I was mentioning, former San Jose Sharks players. You have Jake Wallman at a plus 10,000 to be the first goal scorer in the next game. Now, please keep in mind that lines and odds are subject to change, but nonetheless, here's a kicker. If you are a new customer who bets just $5, you will score $300 in bonus bet if your wager hits. That's right, turn $5 into a playoff payout. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN. That's promo code THPN to unlock $300 in bonus bets when your $5 bet wins. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Bonus bet expires 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Copyright 2025 NHL.
Staying on the topic of, issuing out contracts and things of that nature, we know that free agency kicks off just following the draft, July 1st. Comparing to last season, off-season's free agency, the Sharks brought in Tyler Toffoli, Ty Dellandrea, Cody Ceci, a lot of veteran depth. Maybe one would call them safer acquisitions. And I know that Mike Grier has come out this offseason and said he's not necessarily interested in giving out massive contracts. But do you see a world in which he does take a swing on maybe a big name player?
Not this summer. Maybe next summer. I think is more that this the year that maybe the Sharks would, maybe be a bit more aggressive in free agency. I think this year you look at the class of UFAs, and it certainly has its headliners. Mitch Marner obviously at the top of that list. John Tavares, nice type of players. Matt Duchene, but it's not a star-studded class by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know if the Sharks really want to go hard this in terms of doling out that type of contract right away. I think next year probably makes a little bit more sense in that the players that they have right now will be a year further along. They'll be in a more competitive type of window, or at least approaching more of a competitive type of window, making it more attractive for some of these free agents to come to the team and maybe not put forth such a leap of faith that, you're going to be competitive right away. So, the Sharks are going to spend this offseason. I don't think there's any question about it. They got to spend because they just need to get to the floor. First of all, they got a lot of cap space to play with, and they're going to have to do something to sort of get to that threshold first and foremost. But in terms of the big name free agents, I don't necessarily see it this year with San Jose. Maybe more in 2026. Will be the year when the Sharks do make bigger splash. I tend to think that, this year will be a little bit more modest. They definitely want to make some improvements, especially to the back end. We'll see what they do up front, but just moves to sort of make the team better, but not necessarily putting yourself in a spot where you maybe have a couple of contracts on the books that a year from now you may not really like anymore. So, Mike Grier is going to be patient. He's going to do what he thinks is best for the team, and for now, I think it's more of like a conservative, modest approach. Make sure you're taking a step forward. Make sure you're still insulating your younger players. You mentioned the goalie. I would tend to think that, they're going to try to find a goalie with some experience, not super old, but maybe a guy who's been in the league for a few years and can challenge Askarov for playing time and who could fill in, at least 25, 30 games a year kind of thing. So I think that's an area of need, and obviously the back end too. We'll see what happens there. I think those are the type of players that maybe Mike Grier will be looking for right now.
Sure. So it sounds like maybe the recipe for taking another step forward is just to insulate this young core, see them take that next step and maybe bring in some more veteran pieces.
I think so. I mean, I think that, the Sharks want to see their younger players sort of, help lead the way here. I mean, this is going to be their team soon enough. So, take the training wheels off and let these players sort of take the lead here on this team. I think it's safe to say Macklin Celebrini is going to be the captain of the Sharks at some point here going forward in the next few years. Have him sort of evolve and become that more of a franchise type player. Will Smith, Shakir Mukamadul, and obviously we talked about Askarov, sort of these young pieces that the Sharks have, and maybe start to trend to give those guys a little bit more on their plates and a little bit more responsibilities, let them lead the way. And then you sort of fill in, like you said, around them to help support them, finding a guy who could fit into your top, your middle six forward group or something along those lines. And certainly upgrading the back end to whatever you can do to just try to be a more competitive team, harder to play against. They took a stride in that direction this past season. I think it's another step forward this year, surrounding those type of players and letting those guys develop, but also, adding some veterans around their team as well.
I have a question about the contracts you discussed. You talked about how they're going to try to reach the floor for the salary cap and how they want to let the young guns just run the team. I was just wondering, if we do sign any free agents, you say it'll be very modest this offseason, will they be here long term, or will it be like another Cody Ceci situation where they flip them, but there's still veteran presence?
Yeah, I think I can see both things happening, quite frankly. I mean, Mike Grier was asked, back in April, what, he doesn't want to go any longer than 5 years on any contract, any free agent signing he might have this upcoming season. So, apologize. I think they do have a couple of pending free agents coming up next season, and that could sort of be that almost an old rental type of player, and Mario Ferraro and Alexander Wenberg. That's probably the two biggest UFAs they got coming up next summer or next year. So, if a deal comes along and that makes sense for the Sharks, as we've seen, like you mentioned, the CC trade and other players that the Sharks have acquired here in the last couple of years who kind of fit that role, like Mikhail Granlund comes to mind, and Jan Ruda, those type of players who are just only going to be here really for a short amount of time, and then before you flip them. I don't think the Sharks are opposed to doing something like that, but they definitely want to, put some stakes in the ground here and sign players who are at least going to be here for 2 or 3 more years, or restricted free agents, those type of players. There's a couple of teams out there who might have some cap issues. I'm curious if the Sharks might try to step in and maybe try to make a deal for one of these type of players. I've heard Mason Marchment might be a guy that might be on the move here as the Dallas Stars try to get, their ducks in a row and get Jason Robertson to sign. And obviously with and Jimmy Benn is also UFA, and maybe Mikhail Granlund could be a guy who wants to stick around there too. So I don't know how it's all going to shake out, but my guess is that you're going to find the Sharks, maybe not, going after the rental type players, but, also if it makes sense for them to do that, they could do that as well. I know that kind of a rambling answer there, but I think the Sharks are still at the point where anything might happen. And as long as I think the team feels that they're taking steps forward along the way, that they're open to do something along those lines.
Okay, so final part. My apologies, Tyler.
No, it's all good.
Final question on contracts and kind of a segue into the final segment that we have here about the future of the San Jose Sharks organization. So, a few weeks back, the San Jose Sharks signed former Nashville Predators forward Egor Afanasyev. I hope I said that correctly. He was acquired on the Sharks, or from the Sharks, with the trade for Ozzy Weisblatt. He signed a 1-year deal, $800,000 contract. Where and how do you believe he will be utilized in San Jose with almost 200 AHL games? Pardon me. Of experience
Yeah.
under his belt? Do you think he's going to start off with the CUDA as HL depth, or do you potentially see him cracking the Sharks main roster?
Yeah, I definitely see him as a guy who's going to challenge for a roster spot. This coming year. I don't know quite where he'll slot in. I mean, that's going to be determined during the course of the camp, and he'll get, I'm sure, every opportunity to show he belongs in the NHL. But this is going to be an interesting camp. I don't know if there's going to be. You could say some of those guys who have limited experience are, locks by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of guys who kind of fit into that third, fourth line role, and I don't know where Egor, what his ceiling is necessarily. I don't see him as a top 6 guy right now. Maybe more as a third or fourth line player, and that's a crowded group right now. I mean, when you look at what does Zach Ostachuk look like next year? Does kind of Chernyshov, challenge for a spot? I mean, you've already got guys like, Goodrow and a few other players who are kind of in that mix. So no sure thing that a guy like Egor is going to be making this team, but I'm certain he's going to get every opportunity to. And you also have to keep in mind, maybe the Sharks are concerned maybe about losing him on the waiver wire if they do have to send him down. I'm not sure if they do or not, but I think it's something to keep in mind here as you look at the roster and kind of how it all shakes out. I mean, if the Sharks, let's say Sam Dickinson is on this team next year, well, does that mean you're keeping 8 defensemen and only 13 forwards? I mean, that affects it as well. You can only go 23 players, so we'll see what happens there. But I would expect Egor to at least challenge for a roster spot, get that opportunity to take it, and we'll see what happens. I don't think anything's guaranteed, but I think the Sharks are like sort of his upside and what he can do. And if he does happen to go on waivers and get sent down, he can certainly help the Barracuda as well, given his production past years with Milwaukee. I think the Sharks feel this is going to be a player who can help them at some point. Maybe not right away, but maybe some point this season.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, Curtis, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the Sharks prospect pool. Obviously, we hear a lot about Sam Dickinson, who just had an awesome season in London as the OHL Defenseman of the Year, winning a Memorial Cup where he was arguably the best defenseman in that tournament as well. We hear about Chernyshov. We spoke with Dan Ruzanowski a couple weeks ago about how maybe he could potentially crack the Sharks lineup. We hear about Quentin Musty. There's a lot of big name prospects we hear about, but are there some maybe prospects who might not be discussed as much, who you see as a potential fit into either the Sharks lineup or Barracuda, or just a prospect that maybe excites you that doesn't get enough chatter?
Well, last year we saw, I really liked Ethan Cardwell's game when he came up and played with the Sharks. He's like, you're right. He's a guy who doesn't get a ton of notoriety necessarily or as much publicity as some other prospects. But, when he came up last year, he was, he knew what he had to do. He knew what his game was going to be look like. He wasn't going to be a top 6 type guy. He wasn't going to get much power play time. To stick around, he knew he had to do some of the dirty work, like winning faceoffs and blocking shots, killing penalties. I think the Sharks are really impressed with sort of the maturity in his game, and so we'll see if he can be a guy who wins a job this offseason. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's going to be given an opportunity to kind of do that this season. Jack Thompson is another player I'm kind of curious about where he might fit in this season. Again, he's a guy who got some time with the Sharks this year, didn't totally out of place, had some struggles here and there, but again, a guy who's got some offensive upsides. A right shot guy. The Sharks don't have a ton of right shot D-man either at the Sharks level or the Barracuda. I mean, there's a few guys, but maybe Jack Thompson's a guy kind of curious to see what he does when camp comes around here. And you mentioned Chernyshov. Certainly, the numbers he put up in junior are pretty eye-popping. And what does this game look like at the NHL level? His camp. Again, he's a guy. I think a guy like Chernyshov could probably use some more time in the minors just to refine his game, get used to the pro lifestyle. He's a guy I think the Sharks are very high on. But again, if you don't have to rush him in, then if there's no need to rush him in, you don't have to, kind of thing. So it's going to be an interesting camp, and I think the Sharks are kind of curious to see kind of where these guys fit in and who can help them. Who can be a part of the 23-man roster once camp gets or once the regular season starts.
Yeah, it's certainly shaping up to be a competitive camp. I mean, you even have guys like Patrick Giles in the mix, Pavel Regenda on the Barracuda as well. Like you mentioned, Ostapchuk. I'm excited for training camp in this offseason as well. Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about training camp. I'm just wondering, do you know anything specific that the coaching staff is looking for in the prospects to crack the roster? Something that us Sharks fans could keep an eye out when watching camp videos?
Well, I mean, you don't want to read too much into the lines, what the forward lines look like right away after the camp, but it does give you an indication as to what kind of opportunity that player is going to get, at least to start the season. And so I'm kind of curious about, Colin Graf had a very good first full year in the NHL or in the first full year pro. I know that Ryan Rosofsky was very impressed with Colin's game, how mature it was at this stage of his career. And so does he start the year as maybe a second line guy, or maybe at the very least like a third line type player? A Cameron Lund, what does he look? What does his offseason sort of look like? It's a big summer for him, and what his ceiling is so he tries to sort of reach his potential early on in his pro career. I'm curious about he's certainly got some offensive skills, but there's a lot of growing and maturing, but just physically getting up to speed at this level. Those type of players kind of are curious. I'm kind of curious to see where they maybe start camp, what lines they're playing on, and whether or not they can take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Sharks being hard to play against. Mike Rears talked about it. I was just wondering, during the camp, do you think there's a balance in the decision-making on keeping the Sharks competitive and hard to play against, but also the Barracuda? We saw last year that the Barracuda made it to the playoffs in the second round.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, they want to try to build the NHL rosters and just put the best players on that team as if they've deserved to be there. I mean, we saw last year, Daniel Gushin was a guy who just had a phenomenal preseason and made the team out of camp. Now he didn't stick around all season. He was sent back to the Barracuda fairly easily. But you're in a position now where you've got some guys in the pipeline who are going to be here next year, and you've got some time now to let those guys marinate and develop it with the Barracuda. Like I'm thinking Al Musty or like you mentioned, Philip Beasted's coming up. He might challenge for a roster spot this upcoming season. But a Musty, Casper Haltman, I'm kind of curious about him to see where what he can do at camp. And I don't think he's going to make the team, but I think there's the Sharks kind of curious to see how his game can translate to the pro ranks. And he's a player I think the Sharks really like and see where he can go. I don't know about Leo Salenius Wallman or Salim Wallman, I should say, or Salim Wallenius. I apologize. If you have a lead, if those guys are going to really challenge for a spot. Luca Cagnoni is another guy. Really curious to see if he can stick around camp for a little bit, or does he have to go back for a little more seasoning? I don't know, but it's you're going to be in a spot where the Sharks want to try to fill their, obviously keep the Barracuda as much as competitive as possible. And first and foremost, you want to try to build out this NHL team and put the players who deserve to be there, first and foremost, and let the things kind of develop as it happens, I guess.
Well, San Jose Sharks fans and to the extent Barracuda fans have a lot to look forward to, especially this month with the NHL Draft coming up. Within about 30 plus days, we're going to be looking at the prospect scrimmage and then, of course, training camp starting. So I just want to say on behalf of San Jose Sharks fans and here the crew at Frostbitten, thank you, Curtis Pashelka, for your insights on the San Jose Sharks organization, and we all look forward to your coverage with the Mercury News as the season 2025-26 begins. Follow Curtis Pashelka at Curtis Pashelka on X. And until next time, thank you very much, Curtis, for your time, and thank you to all you San Jose Sharks fans for joining us for another edition of Frostbitten.
Thank you very much, Curtis.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining another episode of Frostbitten presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. Don't forget to like and subscribe, whether you are watching this video or listening to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, don't forget to hit up Shark City Hockey Team on social media at Shark City Hockey.